Welcome, greetings, Sairam, and namaste, everyone. I'm Connie Shaw, and this is my very thoughtful and loving husband, Jim Wright. We've changed the program that we're going to do, and this one is cram packed with fun teaching and healing stories, inspirational ideas, and helpful skill sets. We'll be showing you how to collect barter goods in case you should ever need them, and how to use your current talents and skill sets to barter. We have 7 thrilling stories of animal healings and resurrections told to us from Gabrielle, known as the Snow White of the Eastern Plains. There are 5 new Grabovoi healing code numbers for you to use, and some have already put them on their palms or on their feet or legs. Then we're going to talk about 3 kinds of birds. Which one are you? We'll also show the Miracles Galore video for 2 minutes and the Masters of Light show for 10 minutes and make continual comments as we're guided to do during the program.
There will be inspirational sayings and reminders of your inner powers and keys to help you stay focused during these intense, often stressful times. The Masters of Light will be in the room with you no matter if you are seeing Quantum Giving in live stream or once or twice after that. They ask that you put 1 or more roses in a vase with water for Mother Mary's infusion of her energies so that you can give the petals away as a blessing after the program to friends and loved ones who need help, healing, and encouragement. They can keep them in a tiny baggie or paper in their wallet, pocket, or purse until you give them a fresh one next time. Also, kindly stay seated in this sacred space the entire time once we start so that the Masters can work on you without interruption for a long period to balance, heal, and uplift you mentally, emotionally, and physically. Think of 3 or 4 intentions that you would like to state to God and His helpers directly before quantum gazing, which we will guide you through beforehand. You cannot do any of this wrong, and there is nothing wrong with you.
Let's start with a prayer. Beloved Lord, Masters of Light, saints and angels who have assembled here once again so lovingly and faithfully to help us. We deeply love you. We thank you, and we honor you. We ask that you reinforce the strength of the Holy Spirit within each of us from now on. We ask you to remove the veils of all fear and fearful programming and conditioning so that each of us can know, feel, see, and hear the innate love that we are, and that we become more emboldened and courageous with each passing day. Fill us with a fire of compassion, discernment, the will to serve the whole of life freely and generously. Prompt us to use the gift of manifestation to provide more of our own genuine needs instantaneously as divine beings. Open our hearts to God's love within us, since He lives within us, as us, and knows all that we need to know, and protects us, since who we really are, as spirit, or Atma, Paramatma, the great vastness of being, cannot be harmed and doesn't actually need protection. However, let us know deeply that we're always directed and protected in the outer sense. Keep us in bliss, serenity, and equanimity, no matter what seems to be happening in the outer, as we observe everything with discernment and detachment, ever ready to do the necessary at any time. Finally, please inspire, guide, and assist us to become the spiritual giants that each one of us is destined to be. We love, love, love you, blessed beings, and we thank you. So be it. Amen. Now we are going to show the video, which lasts 2 minutes, called Miracles Galore. Some of you have seen it, and this is a reminder of what the Lord can do, and that each one of these miracles that is mentioned actually represents anywhere from 10 to 100 more just like them. Now we'll begin. Miracles galore. I'm going to read this, although I normally don't read things to you, but I want to read it to you in Gabrielle's own words. This is so extraordinary. She told me, when I was about 7 and living in Fort Worth, Texas, I would run around all day in nature outside where we lived by a big open field. A mother coyote came up to me one day and talked with me telepathically. I followed her, and she went in and carried the pups out by the nape of the neck for me to see and to pet. These were wild coyotes. From then on, I took food that I had saved from my plate, unbeknownst to my parents, to feed the young mother coyote, who I decided to name Louise. Now, if my parents had known this, they never would have let me go back to the field and interact with wild coyotes. So I held the secret tightly and saw Louise several more times until one day she had moved on with her 2 pups. When I later lived on the eastern plains of Colorado in the 1970s with my young children, I worked with all kinds of wild, young animals, to include a baby raccoon named Chelsea, a fawn named Bambi, a wild duck named Rodney, an owl named Socrates, a chicken hawk named Chaucer, among others. I trained Socrates and Chaucer to do many fun things. Chelsea the raccoon helped me plant gardens and loved to eat tiny marshmallows for snacks and takes baths in the bathtub. I also helped a very injured jackrabbit that I named Jack Bunny, after Jack Benny probably, the comedian, to get well enough to go back into his natural habitat. So there were probably about 5 or so animals or birds that had either died or were so close to death that it was a miracle for them to return to the land of the living. I remember one was a duck named Daisy. She had drowned and she had gotten a water tank and couldn't get out because she was handicapped. I had a very close relationship with her and her mate Stuart over several years, so I got her limp body out of the water, took her into the house, wrapped her in a warm towel, and started putting healing energy into her. It took quite a while before I saw any life or any movement. However, after what seemed to be several hours, I was able to bring her back to slow recovery and then return to the backyard with her mate Stuart. She lived many more years after that. Also, I think I mentioned to you on the phone one time about a bird, actually a dove, that had died around 2005 that I worked on and brought him back so that he could fly off. It was lying on the ground, exhibiting no life or vital signs whatsoever, but I had been directed to go home when I was out and to find the bird and to resurrect the bird. I always do everything that Baba directs me to do. This was also at the time that I saw a vision of a big wave coming down over the earth, hitting the planet, and turning everything into a Garden of Eden, so to speak. Then she goes on to say that in regard to the next healings, I brought the animals back to life and then released them back into the wild each time. There were many more stories, but the bottom line is that I became known eventually as the Snow White of the Eastern Plains, where everyone brought me different kinds of wild animals to help to heal and to rehabilitate. It was a lot of work, but lots of fun too. The irony of all this is my parents were not animal lovers, so it was a constant effort on my part when I was young to be able to spend time with animals that I cared for. And by sharing my time, energy, and healing abilities with them, I didn't even realize that I had at the time. I later came to understand what was happening as an adult. So she was actually an animal whisperer and an animal healer as a child of 7 years old. And she didn't even know until she grew up that there was such a thing as that. Now also, she healed an epileptic kitten and a small dog and various other animals, especially birds, who are very fragile and who oftentimes succumb if they fall ill. The interesting thing is that her husband Ed said when they were married in 1988, I only have one caveat. Actually, I only have one requirement. We will not have any animals. We will have 0 pets. I don't want any animals. Well, by this time, Sai Baba had started communicating with Gabrielle telepathically and telling her every time Ed said that, he'll be surprised. You're going to have lots of animals. I will send animals to you. It will all come in my timing. So we may make big pronouncements, as I often do, and Jim knows. And then he says, are you making a pronouncement? Because as soon as I make some big pronouncement, we see the truth that we may state our plans, but God has other plans for us. So it's just futile to try to think we're in charge of anything. Now, Gabrielle goes on to talk about the fact that there was a movie a long time ago called Fried Green Tomatoes, and there was a character, I believe, called Tawanda. Oh, or maybe Tawanda was something that she went around saying. I only vaguely remember that this woman would go around saying, Tawanda, Tawanda. And what it means, and Gabrielle says, between her and Ed, this means don't ever say never to me. So the Tawanda effect is a battle cry for bold action that's been turned into a philosophy to inspire other people. Now then, the fifth story is about Yoda, the miraculous Baba Cat. And so the time this particular situation took place was in the middle of the winter, which is very cold and snowy in Colorado. It was on January the 8th, 2002, and the fourth wedding anniversary of Gabrielle and Ed, and her birthday. So they got married on her birthday and were celebrating their fourth wedding anniversary. Still, they had no animals. Now, it must have been very painful for her to be without animals since she loved them so much for 4 years. And so she says that I told you it could never be the case when Ed told me when we married that he didn't want to have any animals. Looking back later, I know I must have had my own version of Tawanda from that movie, Fried Green Tomatoes. The Tawanda effect was definitely going to be coming up. Ultimately, we ended up with 170 animals in our animal sanctuary in Bennett, Colorado, thanks to Baba and me. So this is the story of how they got their first animal. We had gone out to dinner and had just recently connected to you through reading your book. And since we were eating in a restaurant, it was late evening, and Baba had started coming to me regularly by then, mainly to give me instructions and to see if I would follow them, which I always did perfectly, in several situations unrelated to animals. Now, this particular evening, when we were there at the restaurant, Baba directed me to help him as per his instructions and to go immediately to find a cat that needed me. I'm sitting there well into the evening of our celebration with a husband who wanted no animals whatsoever, and I'm directed to go find a cat right then in the middle of our birthday anniversary celebration dinner. Oh, well, I was so hesitant to bring this up to Ed at all. But then Baba had started communicating with me, and I always obeyed what he said, as I told you. I told Ed what had happened, what Baba had just told me right that minute, and I was totally shocked when he said, "Oh, well, I guess we'd better get going then." We had such a short time to find what Baba called the Baba Cat. So we hurriedly left the restaurant with very little time to get to stores that would be closing too very soon. We went to the first pet store that was the closest. Cats. Were there any cats? No, not a one. The manager told us no, that we wouldn't find any cats because it wasn't the time of year that cats were found in pet stores. We politely left and thanked her and said to Ed, Baba was telling me, go find the Baba Cat now. So we made a decision to turn further north to go to a pet store that we knew about that was in a mall. We got there with just about 15 minutes to spare. We walked in and asked the manager who was closing up for the night if there was a cat there. Did she have a cat? She told us there was one Burmese cat that was a few months old, but he'd been so sick that he probably wouldn't make it much longer. In fact, she doubted that he'd even make it through the night. She had him on antibiotics and then had given up on his recovery, expecting him to be dead before the morning. To her surprise, we asked to see him. Ed said no, immediately on seeing him because of his horrible condition. His fur, oh, he looked awful. But I knew he was a Baba Cat. Ed turned to leave, and as I turned to go too, Ed turned around as we were both walking out, and I was holding the young male cat who, with a very little weak a bit of strength that he had left, grabbed my arm with his little paw and was clinging on to me. Ed turned just in time to see this and said, "Okay, it's him. Let's get him home. We surprised the woman and we bought him. She offered to refund our money if he didn't make it through the night. That is how ill he was. It's very cold in Colorado in January, as you know, so I immediately unzipped my coat, opened up my top, and put him inside my clothes against my heart, and then zipped everything up again. On the way home, we decided to name him Yoda. He looked like the Star Wars Yoda because he was so sick that his ears were laying flat on the side of his head. Oh, poor Yoda. As we traveled back to our home, I could feel him healing and warming up as he lay very still against my heart. I told Ed what I felt, but I don't think Ed was really getting what I was saying. Yoda had been so cold at first inside my jacket, just lying there, cold and limp. This was not a good sign. A sign that we understood meant that we felt he had very little energy left and that he might not make it. We got to the house and I took him out, and to our utter amazement, he had completely come back to life. We both stared at him in total abstract astonishment to see the difference from the pet store Yoda and the new perky Yoda when we got home. This was nothing short of a miracle by our beloved Baba. After that, Yoda was known as Yoda the Baba Cat. And now she tells about a story regarding Jimmy Dean, the pot-bellied pig. Now, actually, Jim and I met Jimmy Dean when we went out to the animal sanctuary when they lived in Colorado before they moved to Arkansas. Another story was about a pot-bellied pig named Jimmy Dean who had gotten very, very sick. Pigs are tricky because they can easily succumb to hypoglycemia if they get out of balance at all. They can get very, very sick. They can get upset and out of balance emotionally as well. This is what happened to Jimmy Dean. He was upset because a previous owner had come to visit him, and Jimmy Dean had been abused by her husband. He must have thought that he was going to have to return to her after his wonderful life with us, and he became inconsolable. He started to go downhill immediately. I stayed with him and was holding him in my lap for quite a long time, thinking he was gone and that he had passed away already from the trauma. I kept doing energy work on him, even though I thought it was completely pointless to do that. I still thought he might not come back. So I kept staying with him and putting energy into him. And then I was just about to let go and surrender, thinking it's God's will that he would die. And then all of a sudden, when I thought he was dead, he jumped up and he started screaming. And you know how pigs can scream and squeal. He was so vital and alive and loud, it just almost scared me to death. All right. The next thing I wanted to mention about Jimmy Dean is that he lived to a very ripe old age, even though he was considered quite old by the time we received him and this traumatic thing happened to him. Ed's miracle and the animal sanctuary story is that Ed actually came to love and care for the animals as much as Gabrielle has. They, at most, at the peak of their animal sanctuary in Bennett, Colorado, they had 170 animals, exotic birds, and goats and sheep and cats and dogs and horses and all sorts of animals for 14 years. They transported their land-based ark of animals to Arkansas, so the ark went to Arkansas for the last few years. The finest food and fodder was given to each animal, and each one of them that we visited had their own special house or cage, and sometimes a little front yard that was fenced in front of their little special house, and that was all for their comfort and privacy. So each animal actually was treated as if it were an only child. She and Ed always take superb care of their animals. Now, Gabrielle's underlying principles of healing and resurrection, which I created as a chart from reading the stories and hearing about her adventures with animals, is this. Number one, I am only an instrument for God's energy, or nature's energy, universe's energy. That means everybody, each one of us, is an instrument used by God. And we've said before, the Father within us does it all. Jim and I are merely step-down transformers and have nothing to do with it, and she's the same way as you are. Now, the person or the animal or bird must want healing or restoration of life. And if they're unresponsive, you can ask them, do you want to go or do you want to stay? And she said a number of animals and birds have said to her, no, I want to go. And so she lets them go. But not many. Most want to stay, but sometimes they've had such traumatic lives. Now, do they want to be healed by me or brought back now? Don't cling to them if they want to go. They might be already out of their bodies. Their body is still cold and lifeless, and they're trying to go on, and you can still talk to their spirit and ask, do you want me to bring you back or do you want to go? I'm here to serve you. I love you. What do you want to do? And this works well with people too. All right. And then finally, be patient and keep loving and praying and sending energy as long as you think they want to live. Now, as Gabrielle says, this could take a few minutes or 12 to 24 hours, or it could take any amount of time at all, or they might start to get well and then they might falter and then start to get well again. So just hang in there and know that God is with you, and you can call on the angels and the saints and the masters, call on God to help send their energy through you into that being. Now, number 5 is very important. Do not force visits or reunions or arrange visits between a child or an animal that has been abused by a former family member or a pet owner or a family member of the pet owner. That encounter could re-traumatize that being to the extent of shocking them into sudden decline and death, which is what happened to Jimmy Dean. He took one look at that woman and then immediately remembered in his own post-traumatic stress disorder everything that happened and didn't want to go back to the situation, and he panicked. So Gabrielle is starting to write a book about her healing and resurrection adventures with birds and animals. So I promised her that I would only share these few stories of the dead dove, Louise the coyote mom, Yoda the baba cat, the drowning of Daisy Duck and Jimmy Dean, the pot-bellied pig, whom we, as I said, actually met at the Sanctuary Ranch in Colorado. Now, I think I neglected to tell you the story of the dead dove. And that is, if I'm repeating myself, don't mind me, you'll hear it for a second time. Gabrielle was driving along the highway one time when she received a prompting from Baba that there was a dead dove back at her house and that she should turn around and quickly drive back there, search for the dove, and then send healing and energy into it. It would be lifeless, but she could heal it, resurrect it, and it would fly away. So that's what she did. She went back home, started looking all around, and found a dead dove, went up to it, and then with great confidence started sending healing energy into it, even though it had no vital signs whatsoever. Don't let that throw you. Just proceed as if you know what you're doing, because God is the doer and he's doing everything through you, and you have lots of unseen helpers. All right. Now then, I wanted to say too that Gabrielle's pens and barns and enclosures are really quite exquisite. Each animal, as we said, has their own front yard for privacy and spaciousness, a lovely little house or a little shed or barn or a special enclosure. And they feel, each animal, that they're well cared for with the best food and fodder, that their cages are clean, their houses are clean, and they have a lot of room to walk around in. And sometimes she lets them go out for a while. And each animal, as we said, is treated like an only child or an only animal. And since some animals are more social than others, it wouldn't be good to pile them up in one big enclosure. They all need to feel that they have individual space and they have the type of enclosure that they need for their particular species.
Now, the next topic is about bartering, trade goods, and trading your skills for other skills or goods. In other words, we're going to talk about trade goods for coming times when you might get in a situation where, in order to get what you need, you have to trade something that you have or have accumulated or your skills. So why would you want to have some trade goods on hand? What items would be worthwhile to collect that are lightweight and easy to carry in case you should have to move or evacuate in some kind of emergency? If the economy were to collapse suddenly or slowly, some goods were not available, what items should you have on hand to use or to trade? This has happened oftentimes in the past, not since the earlier days in the United States, but it happens all around the world all the time. If utilities such as water and power were to go out, what would I need to have on hand? Solar lamps, oil lamps, plastic buckets. When you're considering what to purchase or collect from thrift stores or garage sales, for example, reflect on the things that you and other people might use on a regular basis and might keenly miss if they didn't have them. Think about what overnight refugees or earthquake or flood evacuees might need to start life over again. Use your dowsing skills for the answer when you find some potential barter items and need to know how many or how much of something to get. For example, would these new socks in this garage sale be a good barter item? If so, since there are a dozen pair, could I use or trade all pairs? Yes or no? So here I've put up on the screen while I've been talking a list of some kinds of trade goods, and all of these are quite light and compact.
Which is very key. So in case you need to relocate in an emergency, the fact of their lightweightness and compactness will make it much easier for you to bring them along. Have a variety of things that you yourself can also use and that others might need as well. Trade goods. Snacks, popcorn, unpopped or freshly popped. Also hard candy and protein bars would be good just to keep on hand around the house and in your bug out bag and in your glove box of your car, so that you always have some snacks available that you can quickly get. Also, seeds in envelopes marked with the species of the seeds and the year that they were harvested. Finally, toilet paper or Kleenex to give away or to trade.
Another thing is people need light, and if power goes out, which it has been doing, and in California they've told people don't charge your electric cars because you'd be contributing to brownouts. That just happened last week. Candles, stick matches in baggies to keep them dry, Bic lighters, lamps with wicks and lamp oil are things that can produce light.
Then,
for entertainment, you might have some books, you might have some puzzles or magazines. Those are for you to use and or to trade. Also, when things get tough, having fabric and pins and needles and thread, both for regular sewing and for sewing machines, can be very, very handy.
Absolutely. So check your pin and your thread supply. Now, number 7, clothing, sweaters, socks, hats, and scarves, especially if people relocate to a different area, a different state. They may come from warm areas to cold states like Montana, Wyoming, the Dakotas, and so on. Also, tea bags, coffee, nuts, and seeds. Number 9, first aid items. Band-aids and safety pins are going to be very much in demand.
In the area of hygiene, soap and shampoo, feminine hygiene items, nail clippers and combs are all very useful. Also, multivitamins are helpful for people. Scissors, large and small. And I would add to that, which is not on the list, a knife of some kind or other. Knives, small pen knives, are very handy.
And toothpicks as well, and a folded garbage bag can be very helpful. We've given a lot of these items to the homeless that we have fed over the years, and they've been very appreciative. Now, as we said, there are countless other items that you might want to collect, and you will have thought of many that we haven't thought of. But now it's time for you to consider what skills and talents you have that others might like or need. So these are skill sets to trade. Maybe you are a hairstylist or barber, or maybe you're a home hairstylist and you know how to do haircuts or color or shampoo. You might be able to do carpentry and to build things, and you might be able to do first aid. And I would say at this point it would be helpful for everybody to get a refresher first aid class from your local fire department or a police department or your local clinic or anyone that would agree to teach you and your friends or family first aid and the latest in CPR techniques.
If you needed to, you could trade your skills in sewing, your ability to be a good cook, or your ability to garden. You can trade those skills with someone who needs them.
Also, chicken and egg production, raising goats for milk and cheese would be very, very helpful.
And also doing mechanical work, being able to work on machinery. A lot of people can't do that, and if you can do that, that's a skill that it would be highly in demand perhaps. Also just generally fixing things.
Like lawnmowers and cars.
Or anything that needs repair in order to make it work again. Also chopping and stacking firewood if you're a strapping young lad or a lass.
Also, you might be able to do counseling, nursing, healing, or teaching or midwifery, which means childbirth deliveries or animal deliveries. Okay. All right. It'd be a good idea for you to sit down and make a list of the talents and skills that you currently possess so that in an emergency, when money might not be available, and we're not saying that that is the case or that any of these scenarios will most likely happen, it's just a good idea to be up on what you might need and how you can help other people as well as your own neighbors and loved ones. So you can do a quick assessment of what others need. Everybody needs a haircut periodically. Everybody will need some soothing or healing or counseling at some point perhaps, and you can offer these things to other people either selflessly, depending upon the relationship and the situation, or you can negotiate friendly, mutually beneficial trades. And now we have a chart that says never, ever exploit another's loss for your benefit. Now we know that you wouldn't do that, but some people might. All right, so if a person's in crisis, illness, or poverty, you would never want to benefit from that. Remember, you're ministering angels. We all are, who've been sent here to do selfless service, not selfish service. All right? Now, there are 3 kinds of birds in cases where societies become upheaved and there's a great deal of disorder and chaos. Now then, as you can see, there is Chicken Little, who goes around saying, "The sky is falling, the sky is falling," even though it may not, or it may have in the past, or it may look like it's falling. And then we have the ostrich, who essentially says, "Don't bother me. I like keeping my head in the sand." So Then there's the eagle that serenely rides the air currents or the thermals and is above it all, but vigilant. So, what type of bird are you? Chicken Little can be a Cassandra from ancient mythology who is very uptight and always running around in fear and anxiety, trying to warn people about what was coming, sometimes accurately and helpfully, and sometimes not. So when Chicken Little says, the sky is falling, well, it may not be, but pay attention and do your own research, think for yourself, and check your heart. It may be, but maybe not quite yet. Always verify its information and its context or its setting. Now, the ostrich, who is very self absorbed, doesn't want to face facts. You might say the ostrich is in denial. He doesn't want to think beyond the box of convention or just frankly be bothered at all. So instead of having your head in the sand and your bottom up in the air as a target, I think it's better to have your head upright and your bottom where it belongs and just to be alert and to expand your consciousness and awareness. The eagle soars on the thermals in big spirals, as we said, and is constantly, as we said, surveying the landscape for predators, for food and water, and for the general well-being of the area from a position of height, safety, power, and reflection. So which one are you? Well, the fact is that depending upon the situation and our own conditioning skills, our knowledge, practices, and training, we can each be all three at times. There are some things that truly scare us, even though we try to stay out of fear. Something can kick in or trigger us. And regarding other topics or information, we firmly want to know nothing about them, though they may affect our comfort, outer safety and security, and our own peace of mind. Everybody knows what their own current boundaries are. Try pushing out your boundaries. So we can all strive to be like the eagle more continuously, to be aware and be detached and discerning, and to live in bliss and equanimity. All right.
So here's something that we can keep in mind. We can keep in mind stressing less. I didn't spell that very well, I guess. Stress less. And one way we can stress less is by reducing our screen time and increasing our inner screen time. That's the time that we spend in inner contemplation.
And prayer and meditation.
And prayer and meditation.
Yes.
The main point is to stay as stress-free as possible, yet be aware and vigilant of our surroundings. Now, here is some aspects of current work for humanity. Be vigilant. Be firm in your faith and daily practices. Do them regularly. Don't do them and forget them and forget them and forget them and do them and forget them. Be strong and courageous. We can all be strong and courageous, but it takes practice. And we might need to be strong and courageous in ways we've never been that way before. Keep your mood and your vibes up. There's another thing that requires paying attention to yourself, knowing in advance what you're thinking and knowing in advance what you're going to say before you say it. Is what you're saying an aspect of keeping your mood up or your vibes up? And definitely keep exercising one way or another. Keep walking, keep doing yoga stretches. There are a variety of different ways to keep exercising, even if it's just 10 or 20 minutes a day. So now we'll go ahead and play the Masters of Light slideshow. Well, at least I think we will.
After Amici, right? I'm sorry.
So now we will do the gazing induction. You can think of 3 or 4 wishes, prayers, and intentions for yourself or loved ones during gazing. Think of things that free you and that don't bind you. You can hold up photos if you have them for the masters to see as they work on you. And have your roses on your table or altar so that Mother Mary can bless them with her healing energies. We want to remind you that she, Jesus and Sai Baba, the masters, the saints, the angels, love you very much because you are love itself and you are lovable. It's now safe to let go of guilt and self-destruction. You can ask the Lord for the healing of all addictions and attachments and for the final release of all obsessive or possessive demonic entity attachments that you may have, that are within you or attached to you or hovering in your aura. Addictions, bad habits, time wasters, and demons are destructive and unproductive. Now we're going to breathe in together 3 times, down into the heart and out into the universe, and then begin gazing. So let's all breathe in deeply, raise our shoulders. Breathe out, dropping your consciousness down into your heart center and feeling that special feeling of having your consciousness there. Let's breathe in once more. Breathe in deeply, shoulders up towards your ears. Big breath out, consciousness down into your heart center. One last time, let's breathe in deeply, shoulders up. Now breathe out, let your consciousness drop down into your heart center, feeling that special feeling of having your consciousness in your heart. Now we'll begin gazing with both Connie and myself for about 5 minutes, and the masters are working with you. Thank you. And now, if you would, please take a moment to jot down your experiences that you may have had during gazing, or since we came online. You can send them to your coordinators while the memories are fresh during the next 24 hours so that we can compile and share them. Or if you aren't associated with a coordinator for gazing, you could send them to info, at connieshaw.com. As is our custom in closing, we'll now do a quick review of what we've covered in the workshop today. As you recall, we gave the overview, said an opening prayer, showed the 2-minute Miracles Galore video, gave the Grabovoi healing code numbers, provided inspirational quotes, told 7 stories of animal healings and resurrection by our friend Gabrielle, the Snow White of the Eastern Plains, who's now writing a book on the many who have been healed and resurrected. We'll let you know when it's ready in several months at the soonest. We discussed a grid down scenario, as well as the need to gather trade goods and to identify your talents and skill sets to help and to trade. We also discussed our focus now as humanity and the 3 types of birds. Forgiveness is a major lesson now. Our task is to stay in bliss and equanimity. Everything happens for you and not to you. It's not how you reply, it's how you respond to what goes on. Not how you react, but how you respond.
By the way, we'll send you our new handout called 20 More Ways to Solve Food Scarcity sometime this week. And we hope that you have fun playing with the ideas. You are a perfect child of God. Forgiveness is the key to happiness, A Course in Miracles. Awake and be glad, for all your sins are forgiven, A Course in Miracles. As we said, you are the perfect child of God. That's a quote from the Course in Miracles. It's true.
Yes, you are love itself. You may feel guilty or unforgiving, but you are, in fact, love itself. And you are loved by us, by the Lord, by His helpers, the masters, the saints, and the angels. So give up guilt and self-destruction. You don't need it. You don't deserve it. It's not for you. Ask God for the healing of all addictions and for the release of any and all demonic entity attachments. All of these are destructive and unproductive.
You may now start meditating after we sign off or not, and we'll notify you as the next quantum gazing date. And depending upon what's happening here and in the world, in about a month. So we're tentatively saying that we'll see you again at 2 o'clock Mountain Daylight Time on Saturday, October the 8th. Again, this is a good time for you to jot down your insights, clairaudient and clairvoyant experiences with the masters, any apparitional visits that you had, any tingling or sense of a master patting your shoulder or holding your hand, or hearing any messages, and any healing or forgiveness or letting go of grudges and grievances you might have had on your part toward God, Jesus, Divine Mother, or any person, neighbor, employer, class of people, such as doctors, teachers, coaches, ministers, priests, any group, any governing body, any party, nation, or any past experiences that you've had. Keep your hearts open. Keep extending love to all you meet, as you are love itself. And kindly let your gazing coordinators or let us know of any blessings or miracles to share. As Jim said, you can write us at info@connieshaw.com, and that is spelled info@connieshaw.com. And we'll read every item you send at least once, and we'll pray for you and your loved ones. Unfortunately, because we have such a huge mail volume, it's not possible to answer your mail, but we will be thinking about you and praying for you. And you can pray for us if you don't mind. All prayers are welcome. Farewell and namaste. Let go and let God and savor all the juice and joy of life until then. God bless you all, and we love you, precious beings.